Hey folks, Mike Iaconelli here, Wired to Fish TV, back with another tip for you. Everybody knows about jig fishing, and jig fishing has this mentality of being a big bait, a big power fishing technique, big rod, heavy line. But jig fishing can be a finesse technique too, and I use it a lot. And it's actually a technique that's helped me in a lot of tournaments catch fish when nobody else is catching them. Let me show you a couple tips here with the finesse jig I use from Berkeley called a gripper jig. Basically we're talking about a finesse jig. We're talking about a smaller size jig, usually an 1/8 or a 1/4 or a 3/8 jig, and it's a typical looking jig. The one we did for Berkeley is a finesse football head style jig. It's got a flat head, it's got an integrated line tie, it's an awesome jig. But I've got a trick with this jig. I modify it to make it super finesse. One of the things we did with this jig is we put a 2-part skirt system on this thing. So I like to get this first skirt, and this is your regular silicone skirt, it's just on a band, and I'll get rid of this skirt completely. I take it off. And what we're left with is this kind of a jig head with a little bit of a living rubber puff on the front. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. Second thing I'm going to do is I want to really thin that wire guard down. I want to thin that thing down, and I want to take the length and the thickness out of that guard. So I'm just going to get my nips, and I want to trim it even to the point of the hook. So I'm going to nip that stuff off there, get rid of that, make it small. The next thing I'm going to do is I want to thin out the thickness a little bit. So I take about 1/3 of that guard, and I'm going to cut it away. Now we've got a trimmed guard, we've got a slimmer package. Finally, the trailer. On a normal jig, we're going to use those big trailers, those big pieces of pork rind, those big chigger crawls. On the finesse jig, let's get to a smaller trailer. One of my favorite is the 3-inch crazy leg chigger crawl. We're going to put this dude on here, and we're going to make a really slim finesse profile package. And this is kind of like the shaky head of the jig world. When things get tough, you don't have to just use a spinning rod. You can stick with power fishing, but scale your bait down, trim it out, thin it out, make it more finesse, and you're going to catch more fish. Mike Iaconelli, Wired to Fish TV.